If you think about it right now, a lot of the content that we consume in our native language is not natural or is barely found in daily conversations, which are supposed to make up 90% of the language that we use. For example, when we are talking about video games, we never use or hardly use the terms HP or XP or let's say uh, critical hit or something. These terms are hardly used if you're just talking about really daily life things. Unless the topic revolves around said video games, you're not really going to come up against it. And one of the times during my senior year in high school, I tried to convince my teacher that things like comics and video games were useful for learning. However, she kept rebuking it and saying things like, for example, oh, video games, they keep using like really unnatural things. You're never going to see that in real life. And even when I showed her like a piece of dialogue, the point is that a lot of things we consume in our target language, Mandarin Chinese, is going to be quote unquote unnatural. And this is going to be a big problem because if you obsess too much over naturalness, because this was something I used to do a lot where I just kept trying to, let's say, ask lots of names because like saying, oh, is this all right? Is this real Mandarin? Is this something that I should be, let's say, doing am I doing it right? It can sometimes feel a bit awkward and weird at first because you're obsessing over this thing. And second of all, naturalness isn't really a big concern as I just demonstrated earlier. To give more examples, for example, let's go talk about some pieces of media that can be very popular in learning Mandarin. One, for example, is the news. The news is not natural at all because first of all, people in China when they are on the news talk like they have a very 标准普通话, like a very standard Mandarin to it. They're pretty much trained, and in reality, people in China do not speak like that because China is a very big country, first of all. It has many dialects and accents, and these accents in Mandarin can vary quite heavily. For example, someone from northern China will sound a lot different from, let's say, someone from Taiwan. It's just going to be like that. And that's just one example. Another thing is like, for example, okay, what about TV shows or let's say those daily life sitcoms or TV dramas in Mandarin? Well, first of all, they speak, let's say, even daily life stuff. They're going to probably use a bunch of gestures, terms that sound very corny and cringe when you try to, let's say, watch it. And you would definitely not use these terms, let's say, exaggerations in like a real life conversation. And finally, textbooks. And you know me, I do not like textbooks, but if you look at the textbook and the things that they teach you there, you could even argue that's even more unnatural than things like TV shows and the news, because things like, for example, terms like 你好吗, they pretty much tell you to, let's say, use these terms as like direct translations. And 你好吗, for example, this hardly ever comes up in a situation that you need to, let's say, greet yourself. And even things like 你好 aren't super commonly used, like they're mentioned to be in textbooks. And as a result, you could probably end up with a lot of unnatural speech if you just get off of just a textbook. Even the things sometimes they teach, like for example, the third tone being a rise, a fall, and then a rise, is not really as prominent as most of the time. A third tone is more like a very low vocal fry sort of thing. I'll give an example right here. And just to really put it, it's that simply almost all content in Mandarin, aside from what is natural. Oh, I also forgot. Let's define what naturalness is. So naturalness is pretty much like this talking head thing that I'm doing right now, where I'm just going to be talking to you naturally in front of camera, something in real life that you'll see, someone having a conversation, probably even a podcast to a certain extent. That is quote unquote natural language. Wait, does that mean I can't consume anything in Mandarin anymore and that's it? I can only consume just normal conversations? So first of all, calm down, because it's not the end of the world. I'm not telling you to put away every single part or piece of content that's unnatural. In fact, you already know that I'm not asking you to do that. But rather, think about it for a minute. I already gave another example in our video with novels where I talked about how you could find natural things or useful things in your target language novels, even though it may seem unnatural at first. Taking an example of pillow and comparing it to different parts. For example, if we use pillow, let's say in a TV show or a news article, they're still going to be the same word. Nothing's really going to change. This is the same thing with Mandarin as well and other pieces of unnatural content, because here's the thing. If a piece of unnatural content seems unnatural at first, the foundation is honestly still the same. It's still, after all, Mandarin Chinese. For example, do you see Mandarin speakers, native Mandarin speakers watching news? Yes. Do you see Mandarin speakers watching favorite TV dramas of their own? Yes. Do you see them even using textbooks in Mandarin? Yes. These things that may seem unnatural are natural enough at the bottom of the foundation of Mandarin, where it's still, after all, Mandarin in the beginning. And even if you're concerned about the unnatural things, let's say, for example, if you want to develop an accent, let's say a natural sounding accent, and you don't want to have like just some sort of like news reporter sort of accent when you speak, then I'd say it's a lot easier to find that when there's this unnaturalness thing that sticks out, because honestly, when you immerse in something, it's not going to damage you. And even if you sound a bit funny at first because you've been immersing in a piece of content for a long time, it doesn't really take very long when you immerse in natural content, let's say this right now, or let's say TV, or not TV shows, things like, for example, podcasts and such. And after you, let's say, listen to podcasts for a while, there's going to be a naturalness that sticks out in certain pieces of media, and you'll know, okay, maybe I should not be using this word all the time because it just sort of sounds like weird and sort of like informal. So therefore, I'll use this as well. And even things like, for example, learning a bit more of seeing how different words also come in different structures in unnatural pieces of media is also something that can be really important. I've also talked a lot about this in my novels thing. Please watch it if you're more interested about that. But seeing words in different structures and learning the more rare words that don't really come up can also be very important. And who knows, maybe even one day when you're talking with a Mandarin speaker, who knows, maybe one day when you're speaking with a native Mandarin speaker, what's going to happen is that they might, let's say, crack up a joke once in a while, like say how we, let's say, make reference to certain things in English, and then it seems funny to them, but you just sort of don't get it even though you understood it. And that's also another reason why you should try looking into the unnatural stuff, because sometimes, even though we have to follow the rules of a language when we're learning it, sometimes we also have to break the rules in order to have fun with a language. Okay, but let's go talk about, when does naturalness become a concern? Especially if you're still in the beginner and want to acquire a good accent, you should try avoiding things like bad non-native speakers. Pretty much non-native speakers of your target language that speak so horrendously bad that it's very hard for even native speakers to understand them, where at this point it may not even be considered natural anymore. Also, another thing that I want you to avoid as well would be, at the beginning as well, subtitled content, just pure subtitled content, because this can be sometimes a bit confusing for certain learners, where sometimes it just feels like, let's say, what they're trying to listen to and what they're trying to, let's say, read can sometimes conflict with each other and sort of cause that confusion. Although I'm just going to tell you that I've never really consumed a lot of subtitled content in Mandarin myself, aside from probably just like 1 or 2 anime episodes in Mandarin subtitled, so I really can't give you my final verdict on it. But as a beginner, one of your biggest priorities is trying to get used to the sound system, and reading things and having some sort of other gibberish play along that doesn't match it. It's going to be a lot harder to compare it. It's going to be a lot harder, and it's not really going to be a productive thing to do. And the last thing is, as I mentioned just earlier on, accent and shadowing, where if you want to develop a natural accent or get some sort of shadowing material, you're going to have to pick some sort of thing that's a lot more natural and a lot more talking head style, like this video, where sometimes some of the cuts won't be made, or it's just someone talking pretty much, where if you really want to just mimic the most natural speech, because that's what we're trying to really mimic off of. For 90% of, let's say, your immersion time, you don't need to worry about this. But when we're trying to pick a language parent or an idol and really like try to copy their speech, we want to be copying the person that we want to try to imitate, aka a natural sounding person. So those are the times where either there are 2 pieces of content I would not recommend you use just because of the reason of naturalness, and 1 piece of content where naturalness should come in concern, which is accent and shadowing. And that's really all I have to say. It's that don't really concern about naturalness, especially when it's still, after all, at the end of the day, Mandarin Chinese. And even if you do immerse in things that are considered unnatural, it doesn't really take a very long time in order to fix it. And the best way to fix it is just immerse a couple times in natural content, and you'll very quickly find a difference between what is unnatural and natural. So we have a road to explore. 我们的旅程刚刚开始. And also, if you're someone that's been struggling with learning Mandarin in terms of the reading system, since it can be really hard, I recommend you check out the thing I have in the description. It's a paid program where I'll teach you how to learn Mandarin to immersion without having to memorize thousands of characters. So that'll be all.